Job 4, verse 1, to chapter 5, verse 27, through the Bible. Chapters 4 and 5, Part 1. Theme: the first discourse of Eliphaz, the voice of experience. Job's 3 friends had been sitting with him for 7 days, and they have been wagging their heads as if to say, it finally caught up with you. It seems that Job could take all his suffering, but he couldn't take this attitude from his friends. He broke out in a monologue of complaint and whining. It is black pessimism and has no answer to the problem at all. Now his 3 friends will begin to talk to him. The first will be Eliphaz, and then Bildad, and finally Zophar. The names of these men actually give us just a little pin picture of them. Eliphaz means God is strength, or God is fine gold. Bildad means son of contention. He is a mean one, by the way. He is actually brutal and blunt and crude in his method. Zophar means a sparrow. He twitters. He has a mean tongue and makes terrible insinuations to Job. The dialogue that takes place is a real contest. These friends are actually going to make an attack on Job, and he will respond. This is what we might call intellectual athletics. This type of thing was popular in that day. Today people go to a football game or a baseball, basketball, or hockey game, something athletic where the physical is demonstrated. In those days, people gathered for intellectual contests. I think that by the time this dialogue was underway, a great crowd had gathered, listening to what was taking place. We want to think that those people were not civilized, yet they put the emphasis on the intellectual. And we consider ourselves to be such civilized people who have advanced so far, but we put the emphasis on the physical. We are not as superior to these ancient people as we would like to think. Job has just broken out with a complaint. He is in the deepest, blackest pessimism that a man can be in. The devil has stripped him of everything. He has nothing left to lean on, no place to turn. Even God seems very far removed from him at this particular time. Eliphaz is the first to speak. His is the voice of experience. He is a remarkable man, and he relates a strange and mysterious experience. The key to what he has to say is found in verse 8, even as I have seen. Everything he has to say rests on that. He is the voice of experience. He has had a remarkable vision and has heard secrets that nobody else has ever heard. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, If we essay to commune with thee, wilt thou be grieved? But who can withhold himself from speaking? Job 4, verses 1 and 2. He begins in a diplomatic sort of way, but one gets the feeling he has his tongue in his cheek. This is a sort of false politeness. He says to Job, Do you mind if I say something? Then he adds, Regardless of whether or not you mind my saying something, I'm going to say it. And he does. Behold, thou hast instructed many, and thou hast strengthened the weak hands. Thy words have upholden him that was falling, and thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. But now it is come upon thee, and thou faintest. It toucheth thee, and thou art troubled. Job 4, verses 3 to 5. He is saying to Job, In the old days when you were in prosperity and plenty and in good health, you were a tower of strength to everybody else. You could advise them. You could speak to them and tell them what to do. You knew how to help those who were in trouble. But now something has happened to you, and you have folded up. You're just a paper doll. You're just a paper tiger. You were never real at all. The advice you gave to others, can't you follow it yourself? I would say that that is the problem a great many of us have today. Isn't it interesting that we can always tell the other person what he should do when troubles come to him? It is like the cartoon of 2 psychiatrists meeting one day. One looked at the other and said, You are fine. How am I? We are always analyzing the other fellow, telling how he is. Eliphaz accuses Job of being an expert at that. In a very sarcastic manner he says, "Now it has happened to you, and what have you done? You folded up. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, and the uprightness of thy ways?" Job 4, verse 6. Isn't your own advice good enough for you? It helped others. Now it ought to help you. Now Eliphaz makes an insinuation to Job, but he does it in a polite way. We will find that Job's other two friends are more blunt and crude, especially old Zophar. Remember, I pray thee, whoever perished, being innocent? Or where were the righteous cut off? Job 4, verse 7. He accuses Job of having a chink in his armor, of having an Achilles heel. He says this would not have happened to Job if there hadn't been something radically wrong in his life, something that he is keeping secret. This is the argument. He is making an insinuation, and it's not true of Job. I hear this verse quoted even today, and it's not interpreted accurately, my friend. Now we know this insinuation is wrong and is not true of Job, because at the beginning of the book, God gave us that scene in heaven so that we might know Job and understand his character. These friends will be miserable comforters because they do not understand God, they do not understand Job, and they do not understand themselves. There are too many people who try to deal with spiritual matters who are not qualified to do so. Very candidly, that is one of the reasons I am reluctant to counsel folk. My feeling is that if a person is a child of God, unless it is a technical matter, a theological matter, or some physical difficulty, it can be settled between the soul and God. We don't need to go to the third person. After all, we have an intercessor with God. Job cried out for a day's man, an intercessor, and today we know we have that. For there is one God, and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. 1 Timothy 2 verse 5. Now he's the one to whom a great many Christians ought to be going instead of a minister or a psychologist. And if the problem is physical, go to the doctor, and with that, go to God also. As Eliphaz could speak from experience, I can also speak from experience and say that God does hear and answer prayer, relative to our physical condition and relative to our spiritual condition. It is wonderful to see the way God will deal with Job before he is through with him. Eliphaz is not going to be very helpful to Job. Even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. Job 4, verse 8. Eliphaz is speaking from a very high pulpit and is looking down at Job when he says this. He insists there is something hidden in his life which he has not revealed. He is saying that Job is reaping what he sowed. By the blast of God they perish, and by the breath of his nostrils are they consumed. Job 4, verse 9. This man is wrong. God disciplines his children, but he never destroys them. Eliphaz is like so many of us who give advice. We can tell someone else how he ought to do things in a nice way, phrased in very attractive language, but what we say may not be accurate.